Caught her red-handed, then I made sure she pay the ultimate price. My name's Nick, just a regular guy from a small town in the countryside. Life here is simple, and for the most part, that's how I like it. I grew up working on my family's farm, learning the ins and outs of taking care of animals and handling the land. When I got a little older, I even went off to a nearby college to study animal husbandry. I loved everything about it. The connection to the land, the satisfaction of a hard day's work. My dream was to come back, open up my own feed store, and keep things simple. I wanted to spend my days helping farmers, making a life in the community I'd grown up in. But my real dream was Sarah. We'd been sweethearts since high school. She was smart, beautiful, and full of life. Everyone in town knew her. She was the kind of person who lit up a room. From the moment we met, I knew she was the one I wanted to spend my life with. She had big dreams, and I thought I'd be the one to help her fulfill them, no matter what they were. After college, I didn't waste any time. I married her, and soon we had our first son, and not long after that, another. Those two boys became my whole world, my reason for everything I did. I worked hard for them, wanting to give them the kind of steady, loving home I'd always known. But even in those early years, I could see that Sarah was starting to feel different. At first, I thought it was just the usual adjustment to family life, the bills, the long days, the responsibilities. But she started reading those high-end lifestyle magazines, flipping through pages of designer clothes, luxury cars, and fancy homes. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at them, her face just distant. She started talking about wanting more than what we had, about seeing the world beyond our small town. I loved her, so I brushed it off, telling myself it was just a phase. After all, everyone dreams sometimes, right? Then Sarah got a job in the city at a big company called MedTech. It was an hour's commute each way, but she didn't mind. In fact, it seemed like she loved it. She'd come home full of stories about her work, about the people she'd met, about the fast-paced life she was getting a taste of. I could see the excitement in her eyes every time she talked about it. I was proud of her, but also I could feel this distance growing between us. Little by little, she started changing. She began dressing up every morning, spending more time putting on makeup, doing her hair, choosing her outfits. She was wearing perfume more often, the kind she used to save for special dates or family events. On top of that, she started spending her paychecks mostly on herself. New clothes, beauty treatments, things that we didn't really need. I'd ask about our savings, and she'd just wave it off, saying she'd get to it later. Meanwhile, our accounts barely budged. I tried talking to her, but every time she brushed me off, saying I didn't understand what it was like to work in a professional environment, how important it was to keep up appearances. I didn't want to argue, I wanted to be supportive, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing her, bit by bit. Then things got worse. Sarah started staying out late every Wednesday. She'd tell me she had meetings, but I knew it didn't make sense. Why would a meeting be so late, and why would she go all dressed up like she was going on a date? I tried to ignore it, to focus on taking care of our boys and making life as good as I could for them. But every Wednesday, I felt the doubt creep in, eating away at me. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. One Wednesday, I decided to follow her. I parked my truck outside her office and waited, watching. A little before noon, she walked out, looking even more dressed up than usual. She got in her car and drove to a nearby hotel. My heart pounded as I pulled up nearby, and I watched as she met a man, a guy with slicked back hair wearing a fancy suit. He drove a red Corvette, the kind of car that just screamed money. They walked into the hotel together, and I just sat there, feeling like my whole world had shattered. I sat in that truck for a long time, trying to make sense of it. I'd been half expecting it, but seeing it with my own eyes was a whole different thing. I wanted to confront her right then, to barge into that hotel and demand an explanation. But something held me back. Maybe it was shock, or maybe I just needed time to think, to decide what I was going to do next. The next day, after dropping the boys at school, I did a little digging. I found out that the guy's name was Ken, some hotshot manager at her company. He was married too, with a family of his own. I thought about telling his wife, about blowing the whole thing wide open, but I wasn't sure it would help. It wouldn't fix anything for me or my kids, and honestly, I was just tired. Tired of the lies, the pretending, the feeling that I was losing everything I'd worked so hard for. The following Wednesday, I decided to do something about it. I waited by the hotel, watching as Sarah and Ken met up. Once they were inside, I went over to his car, that flashy red Corvette, and slipped a few nails under the tires. It wasn't much, but it felt like a tiny bit of justice. When they came out, I watched from a distance as he realized his car was out of commission. I didn't feel proud of what I'd done, but it gave me some small sense of satisfaction. But I knew that this couldn't go on. I didn't want to live a life full of revenge and secrets. I wanted peace for myself and my kids. I wanted to show my boys what it meant to be strong, to make the hard choices when they were necessary. So one evening, I sat Sarah down and handed her the divorce papers. I told her I knew everything, that I couldn't live like this anymore. To my surprise, she didn't put up much of a fight. She looked sad, almost relieved, and I realized then that she'd probably been waiting for this too. Maybe she'd outgrown our life, or maybe she'd just been looking for an excuse to move on. Either way, I knew I'd done the right thing. It's been a few months now. I found a new job, one that lets me work a little farther out and save up some real money. I'm putting aside every penny I can, hoping to finally open that feed store someday. I'm focusing on being the best dad I can be to my boys, making sure they know they're loved and that I'm here for them. Sarah made her choices, but I'm moving forward, one day at a time. I'm rebuilding a life I can be proud of, a life of honesty, hard work, and the love of my kids. And maybe someday I'll look back on all this and feel like it was just a rough chapter in a story that's still got a lot of good pages left to come.